he was in a different spot. I think he was in your spot, actually. Yeah.
Good evening, and welcome to the February 10th, 2020 meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals for the City of Plattsburgh, wherein we will hear various requests and appeals. We have two this evening. Number 2233, Tana and Gary Hanley. Are you here? Yeah, wait just a second. Oh. And 2232, City of Plattsburgh, 22 Durkee Street. Who's going to represent for the city? Matt? You know, okay. We're going to do the first one, which is an area variance, and then we're going to have a public hearing for the Durkee Street project. We will not be doing any voting this evening. We're here to get public comments, questions, and for us to ask some questions too about the application. But we'll start with the Hanleys. Come on up now. Thank you. Good evening.
Hi. Hi again.
Joe, you have some pictures? Okay. And that is, that's better. And you were previously before us, and we went back and forth and granted the variances and all that stuff. And then what happened with this?
This was replacing the deck as originally indicated. It was indicated in the drawing of the original variance, but because the deck was attached to the house, I didn't understand that there was a variance needed to replace it, and there was a pergola type.
There wasn't a building there before, right? Just a deck.
There was a deck and like a pagoda over the top of the deck. It shows in the picture that you have of the property, the aerial picture.
Joe, do you have that picture of a pagoda on top of it?
No.
It was from our.
I did see it on satellite imagery though, I know what he's talking about now.
You saw it?
Yep.
There was are you talking about like those southwest things with just rafters or something?
Yeah, there was a wall on the back side, and then it had like rafter thing. I'm not sure what you call it, whether it's pavilion, pagoda,
Right, I know what you mean.
pergola, or whatever you call it.
Okay. So the issue for this is that, so you built this because you thought it was okay.
And
that's
then
why
we found
people
out
usually
that,
end up in trouble with us, or what did
yeah,
that
and as soon as we found out, we stopped and.
And the issue is that it goes against coverage. You're only allowed 25%. When we gave it to you before, we went to 25 point something, correct, Joe?
25.76 is what was approved in November.
And this, what happens is, and sometimes we do these and we say, oh yeah, you can put a porch on with a roof, but you can't close it, but you obviously wanna, this is gonna become living space?
No, it's a 3-season room. It's
Does it have a foundation, or are you using?
No, it's the original decking.
But I guess it's still considered enclosed, forgetting about the roof issue, if it's a 3-season thing, it's still considered enclosed. You could theoretically at some point support it, put a foundation under, meet building code, and then make it 4-season, correct, Joe?
Yeah, if you ever wanted to turn it into a living space, you'd have to meet the building code.
Right.
And he would have to come to you for a building permit.
Yes.
So if we put any stipulations, that would show up at that time.
That's right.
Okay.
I mean, I suppose, you really want it for a 3-season only?
Yeah, support.
Okay, so I guess I would say that if there was, in a sense, similar to the motion about when we put a roof on and say, can't enclose it, they want to enclose it, but it can only be a 3-season porch and cannot be increased to 4 seasons or foundation added, or however you want to say it, right? Increase its code compliance.
If we want to put that.
If we want to, we may not want to. Anyway, I'm gonna let anybody here ask questions first, before I open to the public.
I just wanted to make sure, I wanted to confirm something with Joe. Joe, you said that just by virtue of the fact that there's a roof, it already is, that establishes more coverage than the open deck without a roof.
That's right, the roof is the issue, yes.
And the
But
pagoda
if it-
roof that existed before wasn't considered a
Joe,
roof,
if
because it's
it-
not enclosed.
If it had a pagoda-type roof, that's not really covered, is that correct?
That's right.
Because it doesn't, it's not protected from the elements. So we can't say, oh, he had a roof there. Because he didn't have a roof, he had those rafters.
Yeah,
Right.
whatever.
I mean, I just want to, we're just trying to be clear about. I'm gonna open this to the public. Does anybody in the public have any comments regarding 2 Kellogg Court? No? Okay, then I'm going to close the public hearing portion of this. And does anybody have any questions? The exact, Joe, we have a seeker. Anybody have any questions before I go to the seeker? Okay. So the seeker is, I'm sorry to hurt your feelings, incorrect. In that, question number 1, I'm sorry, question number 2, does the proposed action require permit approval or funding from any other government? You have no, it's actually yes. And you need that's okay, I'm doing it on here, you don't have to do anything.
Ah,
You need a ZBA variance, and you need a building permit, which obviously, if you had come in before, he would have told you no, and then you would have come to us anyway, but I mean, it wouldn't have been up. And also, question 5, you say it's permitted under zoning regulations, and the answer is no. And consistent with the adopted comprehensive plan, I think you could say yes, because it's relatively these minor things. Did anybody else see anything else in the seeker about, I don't think we're, if not, I'm looking for a motion regarding the seeker.
I'll make a motion for appeal number 2233. That after review of the short environmental assessment form, part 1, that in part 2, no or small impact may occur be checked in items 1 through 11, and that the second box be checked at the bottom of page 4 and the chair sign.
Seconded by Nick. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Now, does anybody have any questions, or anybody want to discuss how a motion might be worded? Or does anybody want to just do the word and then the wording, the motion will correct you? Scott. I don't care what I can do.
I'll make a motion in regards to appeal number 2233, Class B area variance at 2 Kellogg Court, to approve what they have and what they're planning on building for the porch, increasing their deficiency of area coverage by 1.5%?
1.6%.
1.6%. With no conditions.
Seconded by,
I'll second.
Ellie, did you say second?
I don't know if I can.
Oh, you get, no, you're not voting, right? I'm sorry. Megan will. I forgot she was just sitting up here. Okay, so a yes vote is to approve this as built with no restrictions for fully enclosing and or making it a 4-season. That's what we're voting on. We'll see if it goes through.
I thought we had security all of a sudden.
It's pretty antiquated, that's all we can afford.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, you have a unanimous yes vote.
Thank you.
5 votes to let you do that. Just as a quick aside to not only you guys, but everybody here and you, this is a good reason why if you ever think you're gonna build something in the city from a
Yeah,
fence to a dog house, go to the building inspector and say, is this okay? That's all you gotta do, just go and say,
We
is
live
this
at
okay?
155 acres
Yeah,
right now.
it's,
We're-
it's okay. People do it all the time. I'd just like to get that out. You're all set?
Okay,
Go get a
thank
building
you.
permit.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sound like the one down in Hamilton.
Okay. We are now gonna be discussing the City of Plattsburgh 22 Jersey Street special use permits. All 6 of us are gonna stay up here because we're not voting. And I don't think it's improper necessarily because who knows what's gonna happen in the future for, when applicants when the application is finalized. But just in case, we wanna make sure that everybody's familiar. I don't think, one of you's probably not gonna ask questions anyway, right? Okay. Tell the other one to ask. So here, we're here, and I think everybody's here about 22 Durkee Street, which is actually known as the city parking lot, I guess we'll call it. And we have an application. This has been changed from the one we saw in January slightly?
That's correct.
Okay. And the narrative has changed a little bit. This is gonna be a public hearing. I talked about this downstairs a little bit, but this is a public hearing. The purpose of which is going to be to discuss this project as it appears before us in this application. It'll be on the screen also. We're gonna go through a little bit about the project, just as general statements from the applicant, and then we're gonna start taking public comments. And our job, as I read when they first came in, and has been confirmed to us by the city attorney, our job as a zoning board is to grant a special use permit to a project, assuming that it meets the criteria as set forth in the zoning ordinance, and the application goes item by item through the criteria and indicates why the applicant feels it meets that. We've had correspondence from other people saying why they think it doesn't. But our purpose here tonight, without getting too forceful about it, is that we're here to hear comments from the public. What I would ask is, a lot of people here, everybody likes to get up and say, I don't agree either, or I do agree, or I like this, or I don't like that. We just don't need to hear it 30 times. I mean, I don't know how to say it any other way, but we don't need to 30 times, 30 people could go, I think it's too big. I'll do it at some point if you want. I'll say, everybody who thinks it's too big, raise your hand, or everybody who doesn't like this or that, raise your hand. I am looking for comments, though, we are, and we want to understand both what the applicant feels about the project and what the public feels about the project, so that we can answer these 5 criteria, even though we are actually considering the boundary and the first floor apartments. So we still, within that and within our application, have all the information. I have some questions, and we'll get to it. But we're gonna have a public comment period, and I just closed the other one, public comment period, but I'm not going to close this one. I'm going to adjourn it when we're done, because then it can be reopened anytime at future meetings as this whole process progresses. And that's really what we care about. We care about the process. We have a process in place to evaluate projects and understand if they comply with the code. That's what we're here for. So, that said, I'm gonna let you guys start, and then that'll lead into public comment.
Okay. We've all met. I'm Matt Miller, Director of Community Development for the city. To start off our presentation tonight with the city's GEIS process wrapping up shortly, I thought it would be beneficial for the city's special counsel in regard to seeker matters to come here and discuss with the board the process going forward and the board's obligations under seeker when evaluating these applications. This is Mark Shackner of Miller, Manick, Shackner, and Hafner, who is the city's special legal counsel, and I will turn it over to him to
Okay.
present what will happen in the next couple of weeks.
So, board members, good evening. I'm not gonna start at square one of the SECRA. For everybody's benefit, that's the acronym SEQRA, State Environmental Quality Review Act. I'm not gonna start at square one of the SECRA review process. I'm gonna more or less start at where we're at and talk about going forward. If you want me to back that up at any time, please let me know. Can people hear me? Good. Pardon? Okay. And I apologize for the layout, but you're looking at me back. I am the city special counsel. My colleagues and I are the city special counsel, largely to oversee and make recommendations about this State Environmental Quality Review Act SECRA process. You all know, and presumably the public knows, that the Common Council has been designated as the SECRA lead agency, and that in that role, the Common Council has caused the preparation of an environmental impact statement. In this case, it's a relatively specific type of environmental impact statement called a generic environmental impact statement. You all, and presumably the public also know, that the Common Council has accepted the generic environmental impact statement as complete, has not yet finalized or completed its role as the SECRA lead agency. There's one step remaining, and the one remaining step is for that lead agency to adopt what's called the SECRA findings statement. That's actually the conclusion of the lead agency's SECRA responsibility and SECRA role. The finding statement, these are my words, I'm not quoting verbatim what the regulations and law says, but the finding statement in essence has the lead agency deciding whether weighing all environmental factors and considerations into account, and also factoring in social, economic, and other benefits and or detriments of whatever is being proposed, whether the environmental impact statement and the underlying action avoids environmental impacts as much as possible, minimizes environmental impacts as much as possible, and mitigates environmental impacts as much as possible, and whether on balance the social and economic benefits of whatever is being proposed outweigh any environmental impacts. That's a sort of a quick summary of what a SECRA finding statement does. The lead agency generally goes first in terms of making or adopting a finding statement, and that's what's anticipated here. The Common Council is expected to do that sometime in the near future, and that will be conclusion of its role as lead agency of the SECRA review process. You all are one of what's called the involved agencies. Involved agency, my colleagues and I don't like legalese, but in order to make this understandable and legal, I have to lapse a little into it. An involved agency doesn't exactly mean what a layperson would think involved means. It means an agency that has some sort of approval authority over what's being proposed. Your board, the Zoning Board of Appeals, has some sort of approval authority over what's being proposed, in that you're reviewing 2 special use permits for component pieces of the overall action. So because you're an involved agency, you too, prior to issuing your decision, have to adopt a SECRA findings statement. It can be the same SECRA finding statement that the Common Council adopts, but it doesn't have to be. It can be a different SECRA finding statement. It can be partially the same and partially different. You're not bound by whatever findings the Common Council makes when it concludes its SECRA process. What you are bound by is the legal requirement that you adopt a finding statement prior to making your decisions, which in this case would be your decisions on the 2 special use permits that are sought. That's a thumbnail sketch of it in a nutshell.
Okay. So, we still, the findings are come to us, and we still have to approve them.
So what comes to you, I'm
The
sorry?
findings, and all of this is done, and it comes to us, and we approve it.
You,
We vote to approve it.
well, you vote, you have the obligation to make your quote-unquote your own finding statement.
That's right.
You don't have to approve exactly what the Common Council's finding statement was. You will get the Common Council's finding statement, as will the other involved agencies. You should carefully
Okay.
review the Common Council's finding statement. You can approve it exactly as the Common
Right.
Council adopted it, or you can refine it and change it. It pretty much in
Right,
any manner
that's
that
what I
you see
thought.
fit.
And that makes sense.
But you have to do some sort of finding statement prior to your decision on the special use permit.
That's right. So, and frankly, we've been doing this, when we have lead agencies on other stuff, not even necessarily this, throughout history, we've done it wrong. We've said, oh, planning board was lead agency, they did the seeker, we don't have to do it. Not correct.
No, actually, that's probably not true what you just said. If it's only, what the wrinkle here on the finding statement is only because this overall action has been the subject of an environmental impact statement. When a lead agency is designated and issued what's called, and stop me anytime and back me up.
No,
if you
yeah,
want me to back
okay,
this up.
go fine.
When a lead agency is designated, and it issues what's called a secret negative declaration.
Yep.
What I think you all just did on the previous
that's
application, I
right.
was only listening with one ear, but I'm pretty sure you did that. When a lead agency issues a secret negative declaration, it is correct that the other involved agencies don't need to conduct any secret review.
We don't.
Correct, so it sounds like unless you did what you said on other environmental impact statement projects, which I'm guessing you have not, because I can't imagine there have been very many
No.
in Plattsburgh, then you've been doing just fine. What's different, why this is a different
Well,
animal,
it's because it's EIS.
that is
GIS.
exactly right. It's a different animal because it's subject
Great.
to an environmental impact
Good.
statement.
All right. Does anybody have any more questions about this? Okay, just so you know, public-wise, we're gonna go through whatever's gonna happen here, then we're gonna start taking questions. And we're gonna have to figure out exactly how we're gonna organize that, but which we will. Questions, and then there'll be also just comments. Okay. So we understand that. We know what we have to do. When do you think that's gonna be ready, the GEIS?
Either this week or the
Hang on one
following.
second. The GIS has already been accepted.
I'm sorry, the findings.
Sorry.
The finding statement should, we anticipate either this week or the following week.
Okay, so you're anticipating that will be ready for us to accept or change, or whatever we do with it, at our,
At your
March
March
meeting.
meeting, yes.
and that will take act, we can, depending on what else we found, or what other questions we have, or any of this other stuff, we can, at that point, modify it, not modify it, adopt it, whatever, agree to it, and then move on to deciding what we want to do about the SUPs.
That's correct.
That's the process, and it has to be in that order.
Yeah. Does anybody else have any questions about this, the GEIS? No? Scott?
No.
Okay, well, okay, so what's next?
Okay, well, thank you, Mark. At this time, I will introduce Gail Henderson King from White and Burke Real Estate Investment Advisors, who will brief the board on some of the updates that have taken place to the application since the last meeting.
Okay, sounds good.
She can take my seat.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm doing.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
Good? Yeah.
Good evening. Thank you for,
Hi.
fine.
Does that
Try to speak
Does
up as
that
loud as I can.
No,
That's only to
just
record,
records?
that
That's
doesn't
recording.
broadcast it.
Okay. We submitted revised information for you addressing your comments from the January zoning board meeting. You'll see in your packet, there's a revised site plan application. There's renderings that have been submitted to specifically from Bridge Street in different directions to be able to address your concerns about the visibility and the height of the building. We've provided cross-sections and elevations of the building for you. We've also provided supplemental project narrative that has gone through each of the criteria that you will be reviewing for both the two SUP applications and addressing in more detail specifically on the proposed development for the SUP applications. And we've also submitted a revised deviation table. And within that deviation table, one of the pieces that's been added onto that is the parking. And that was done, and actually that's been revised since that was submitted in the last week. There's been some changes of how Prime has looked at counting, dealing with the parking spaces in relation to a similar project, and they will talk about that in a little more detail. But it addresses the parking numbers issue, and we'll go through that. There was concern about the 3-foot setback on Bridge Street. It originally brought up in presentation in January. Again, we submitted the elevations and the perspectives that hopefully will address that, and we'll go through that information for you. In terms of public transportation, there was a question about a bus stop being proposed for the site. The city is looking at putting in some type of looking at how to handle a bus stop, whether it's on Durkee Street or Bridge Street, but that would be in the right-of-way. It will not be on this specific site. It'll be part of the right-of-way, so that's a separate issue that the city is dealing with outside of this project. And so for tonight, we're looking, we understand that the hearing will not be officially closed, but it will be continued, but we're looking for the application to be referred to the county board for their March meeting with additional information to address whatever comments that you have tonight, so that can be looked at by them in March.
I'm sorry, say that again?
The Clinton County Planning.
Okay.
I'm sorry, the Clinton County Plan.
Yeah, right, okay.
Apologize.
Okay. I wanted to make sure, yeah.
So with that, I will turn it over to Turner Bradford of McFarland Johnson, who is going to talk about the parking in more detail for you.
Great.
Thank you, Gail. Turner Bradford, McFarland Johnson. So, as Gail mentioned, as part of the PUD and in conformance with section 36021 of the city zoning code that covers PUDs, the project is going to request a alternate calculation for parking demand. And I think that was mentioned at the last ZBA meeting, but the calculation itself has been modified slightly, so I will go through exactly what it is that we are requesting.
It's different, is that correct? Some of
The
the
calculation's
narrative says something and this says something else. One says 272 and one says 286. I thought I saw that in the narrative.
Maybe. So the project will still provide the same number of parking spaces.
Right, I'm talking
It'll be
about what was
286.
required.
Okay, so I'll go through right now
Right.
what it is we're requesting that the calculated demand be. So what the zoning code 36021 says is that the applicant needs to provide sufficient detail for the zoning board to determine that the alternate calculation is correct. So what that caused us to do is go back and find, we wanted to find the most similar project that Prime had done. See how that parking was calculated, and then, judge how that parking performed over time. So the most similar project that Prime has done is called the Hamlet and is in Saratoga Springs, New York. It is a mixed-use residential commercial development that is comprised of 3 buildings surrounding a center courtyard parking lot with residential parking under the residential building. So it's a very similar project to set up to what we're looking at for this site here. The parking for that project, the parking demand was calculated as 1.5 spaces per residential unit, which I think is what we had mentioned before. 1 space per 300 square feet of commercial space. And commercial space covers all 3 uses of commercial, retail, and a restaurant. So all those are calculated the same. 1 space per 300 square feet. And then 1 space per 2 employees. And the employees are estimated to be 1 employee per 900 square feet of commercial space. So that project was approved in 2014. It was constructed in 2015, and it has been occupied and operated since then, so 4 years plus. The occupied building space breaks out to over 10,000 square feet of restaurant space, over 20,000 square feet of commercial retail space. There is a 20,000 square foot market in one of the buildings and 54 residential units. In that time, there have been no parking deficiencies at the hamlet. I think it's worth noting that while the layout and the use, of the hamlet are very similar to what we're talking about, its location is actually a little bit different. It is not located within the urban core, of Saratoga Springs. It is outside of that urban downtown, and so there is no parking that is really adjacent to the hamlet that is not on the site. So if you cannot find a parking space at the hamlet, you cannot go to the hamlet. There's nowhere else to park. And it is not connected to a walkable downtown. So really, everyone who utilizes the hamlet drives there in an automobile. So those two things would drive up the parking demand to be higher than the project we're talking about here that will be in an urban core. So using the proposed calculations that we're gonna recommend in the PUD, the project would have a parking demand of 226 parking spaces. It'll still provide the 286, but the parking demand would be 226. And as a reference, per the city zoning code, its parking demand would be 317. We have shared these calculations and the project information with the city's building inspector and asked for his review of it and its applicability. And he had no issue with what we were proposing. And based upon the building uses, the comparable project, and the fact that we are gonna be in the urban downtown city core, we are more than comfortable using these calculations to calculate our parking demand.
The 286,
The 226.
now the 226.
Yeah, we will still provide the 286, but our demand will be 226.
I didn't see that, did I miss that? It's no, is that anywhere in, I don't think
Is
it's
that
in.
in our most recent?
Charlie Gottlieb with Whiteman, Osterman, and Hannah. That narrative was submitted at the deadline for the ZBA
Okay.
submission.
All right.
This parking design and parking
Okay.
calculation was,
We don't-
after we reviewed
Okay,
everything.
so we don't have the 226,
You have not yet received that narrative.
right, we
Well,
don't have anything. The only other one I have, and that's what I told you that I found, is using the IT parking generation manual calculation shows demand of 272, that's in a narrative here.
Correct.
Okay, but we don't have anything that says that, because this goes to the question about the public parking spaces. We don't have anything as part of the application that talks about the number 226. I'm not saying you don't have that information, we don't have it.
No, you're absolutely correct, and because it wasn't designed in time for the last submission deadline, so what
Right.
we're gonna do is we're gonna likely submit a response to all the comments we hear tonight. We will
Right.
include the
Right.
information that
Including
Charter
that.
just mentioned.
Okay.
And, then as the public hearing continues, we'll just
Okay.
keep on talking.
Okay.
Now, what was your basis for your new calculation, other than that you had done the same thing in Saratoga? How did you come up with those numbers? I mean, numbers we have came from transportation engineering manual, whatever. What is the basis behind using the numbers you're looking at? Other than that you used them in Saratoga?
Right, and they're currently working fine, and I think, one of the goals is, I think if you look at the city's, parking code, it hasn't been updated in a while, and I would argue that it would lead to an over-parking scenario. And, the goal is to find the sweet spot where you provide enough parking, but you're not over-parking your project, right? And so, the best numbers are numbers that are proven by, by use.
What's the occupancy rate at the Hamlet?
Right now it's at 96%.
Okay,
With 50, what did you say it was?
I believe there are 54 residential units.
Okay.
is that 96% residential or total?
That's 96% residential, the commercial is completely built.
Okay.
could you just explain, you said it at the very beginning, how, you know, the 1.5 per residential unit, you went through, can you just run through that one more time,
Sure.
because I didn't
Yep.
get it?
It is 1.5 parking spaces per residential unit. 1 parking space per 300 square feet of commercial space. And basically, commercial space is anything that's not residential, so that would be commercial, retail, restaurant. And then 1 space per every 2 employees. And the estimated number of employees is 1 employee per 900 square feet of commercial space.
Okay, thank you.
There's 1/2 space per employee, right?
Yeah, I said 1 per every 2 employees,
Yeah.
so that's
Oh,
a half
same
space
thing,
per
okay.
every employee.
It's been a long day.
Yeah, no. I only did that because a half space is really considered.
Fair enough.
Am I turning it back to Gail? Or are we?
No, the reason we wanted to just verbally tell you about this new parking count was to give the public the opportunity to hear it before we submit it, so that they can incorporate it tonight into their comments, review our upcoming submission, and at the continued
Okay.
public hearing report as well.
Right.
But I think at this point, we're prepared to, you know, sit and listen.
Yeah, okay, I have a couple, I just wanna go through this a little bit, question-wise, partly about the parking. So, this drawing that lists the 286 is not accurate anymore. I understand why it was put in right at the end and blah, 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 but I'm not saying you're not providing 286, but it calls for you to need 286, that's not what you're proposing anymore.
Correct, we are proposing.
Okay, so you're saying that you need 226. Are these all full-size parking spaces?
Correct. Yes.
Yes. Just as an aside, the planning board is allowed to, I'm not sure about you're gonna have to get I know we are doing size things, right? Or whatever, area things, but I'll just tell you, you're showing a 24-foot aisle width, and when in fact the city code calls for 26. The planning board can grant that 24. But the other question that you ought to do when you look at this parking calculation is talk about compact and subcompact cars, which cannot be used for the retail space, because you can't assign those spaces, but can be for the rental space. And the planning board, we don't even give that or deal with that. But one way to talk about what you're providing for spaces is if you proportionally knew how many at other facilities, how many spaces you had that were, or how many cars were compact and subcompact, that you could, as long as you're controlling those spaces with tenants. It does not work for retail space or any other requirements, or even employees, frankly, probably. But I'm just mentioning that. So we're gonna be looking at a new application that we will get,
It'll be received prior to the deadline for submission for the
right,
zoning
whatever it
board's
is in
March meeting.
February, right?
Yeah, I believe it's the 21st.
And we're gonna open up again, wait. And that will talk about the parking, and all the other stuff. We do have, I mean, there's a whole narrative here. This application is right now on the city website, and you can go get it. Anybody can go get it on the city website, correct?
That's correct, right, Joe?
I know it's correct because I went and got it.
Okay.
And made sure, because somebody asked about it, and I sent them the link.
Mm-hmm.
Not the most updated, it's this one though.
Correct,
That's right. So the new one will go up once we go through the process, and that's fine. Do you guys have any more questions, or we just wanna go right to the meat and bones of this thing right now?
We're just doing public hearing, correct? Go for it.
Okay. Did you have anything else to present before we go to the public hearing part?
No, the only thing that I was going to point out was there was a request to the board, you know, in talking about the special use permit criteria and what the board can consider and not. The narrative that the board received for this meeting, which will be revised to reflect parking, talks about the project itself.
That's right.
And so I just wanted to make that clear. That's why it's a little bit longer and a little bit more comprehensive.
Right. And I will tell you that at the last meeting, I asked Dean, who was not here tonight, the city attorney to tell me what we were voting on, because the special use permit says for the boundary and the first floor apartments, and the first floor apartments are, we understand. And his opinion was that we have to consider this based on the 5 criteria shown in the application, shown in the code. You've answered it, we have other correspondence that answers a different way. And I guess before I open the public hearing, that's what we're here to talk about. There are 5 criteria, I've read it a couple different times about general height and character, parking, traffic, and all that. That's what we're here to talk about, that's what we're gonna consider, and I don't wanna be too forceful again about this, but whatever anybody's feelings are about the pilot or transparency or the process that got us to this point, we don't have any jurisdiction over that. We don't have any say about the pilot, that's the IDA. I don't even know what they had their meeting today. I don't even know what they did. But that's not what we're here to talk about. I'm not saying it's not interesting, I'm not saying it's not important to the project. I'm only saying that that's not what we have jurisdiction over. We have jurisdiction over the 5 components that we must see that this meets, and how we interpret this project. That's what we're here to talk about. We're not here to talk about who's getting rich off it. We're not, suspicions. We're not here to talk about it. We are here to talk about if somebody thinks it's too big. We are here to talk about how it affects character. We are here to talk about layout problems. But we aren't gonna vote on any of those area things. We're not gonna vote for variances about parking or setbacks or anything. That's not part of our jurisdiction in this planned unit development process. That's not how it works. We're here to vote on the special use permits, 2 of them, that must meet the criteria in the code. That's what I'd really like people to talk about tonight. Not about other stuff that, why it's gonna, they're not gonna have their parking place, it's their favorite one, I don't know, whatever it is. And I'd also really ask that people not just keep repeating over and over again the same thing. But we're gonna do this, we've recently found that I can't make anybody say their name. Because people that are, the main reason is because people who might have been subject to domestic violence or stalking may not want to give their name, because then somebody else can find out where they were or who they are. So if you want to give your name and your address, we'd like that, because it's helpful to us, especially if we want to get more information from you. But you do not have to. But I'd like it if people would, we would like it, but there's no pressure to do it if for any reason you have a privacy issue about it. So let's understand that, okay? It's helpful if you say who you are, where you live. So we're gonna open it up. I'm gonna do it by, people are gonna raise your hands, all of you, of course. And I will start calling on you, and we'll just work our way through it, okay? The public hearing portion is now, comment portion is now open. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yeah, sure.
Comments here.
Do you want to say your name, or you don't want to?
Yeah.
Should we get a microphone on, so the
Huh?
audience can hear?
I can't actually.
I'll speak loudly so you can all hear me. I'll hear back there. My name is Scott Allen. I'm a downtown property owner, a downtown business owner, a downtown employer, and also had some experience coming before the zoning board of appeals in the past on projects involving development here in the city. You answered one of my questions earlier, Mr. Chairman, when you said that the public hearing is still open. I was frankly concerned that you would consider this evening as a way to hear from the public and then close the public hearing and then vote at your next meeting. I'm glad to hear that the public hearing is still open, so I encourage everyone from the public to attend the meeting during which you actually vote, so you can hear from the public just prior to your vote and not a month ahead of time. Even though you may not expect to deny the special use permit, we do expect it to impose reasonable conditions on the special use permit. And I think there's wide precedent for the zoning board imposing conditions on special use permit approvals in the past. Also, the other thing I wanted to point out is that what you have before you, actually, you showed the plan earlier. You held it up, and I noted that it's also on the city's website that the plan is conceptual. At no point have I seen final plans, and I don't believe any of you have. And it's typical in my experience for the zoning board to be reviewing the final plans for the project, the same plans that the planning board reviews. And I would caution against the zoning board falling in for a shell game where you are told that you don't have to act on a certain aspect of this project because the planning board will take care of it for you. I don't believe that's true. I believe you as a zoning board have the power to impose conditions on a special use permit approval. And the other thing, as the procedure, as to the application itself, I keep hearing that it's a two-part application. One is for the boundaries of the PUD. The other is for first floor apartments. I don't understand that, frankly. I believe what you're reviewing is an amendment to the plan unit development approved many years ago for the Gateway project. I think that you need to look at that original special use permit approval involving that plan unit development and look at this amendment, look at this as an amendment to the original plan unit development. I would encourage you to look at the final layout of the lot relative to the Gateway building. There's a new lot line being proposed which will permanently fix the boundaries of the Gateway parcel. Heretofore, the Gateway parcel has been on a city-owned parcel that included the entire Derby Street parking lot. Now, we're looking at separating that parcel out. I think you need to look at all aspects of that standalone parcel and as part of your plan unit development review. And in the application, I found very scarce information about how that Gateway parcel will look subsequent to the new subdivision that's being proposed. And again, I just want you to not fall for a shell game, believing that everything's gonna be passed off onto the planning board for their review. I think you have a very important part of this process. There's plenty of precedent for the zoning board posing conditions on special use permits.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, I'm looking for a hand to be raised. Come on up, or stand up there and just say what you want to say.
My name's Jim Foley, out of the West End in Plattsburgh.
There, so you can hear the microphone.
People watching won't hear you. I would hope that you will consider voting no on this project, not imposing conditions on it. The report I just heard on the parking suggests to me that it's going to add to parking problems in downtown Plattsburgh and not solve any of our parking problems. The green space that's associated with this project is very inadequate and far from what was originally proposed. So the fact that we don't have a final plan to look at now is of real concern to me, because the original plan was lovely. And what has been proposed since then has much less green space, much less accessibility, and is not in keeping with the character of downtown. So I really hope that you will consider just voting no. This project doesn't provide adequate parking, it does not provide adequate green space, and it is not in keeping with the character of our downtown. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, look for a hand. Okay, come on up.
I stand here.
Over here.
The mic, wait a minute, the mic. Right. I'm Tim Palkovic from Plattsburgh, live in the city, and very concerned about the city. I'm not expecting what would go on here. I wrote a little piece that I rehearsed takes 4 minutes to read. It's about parking. Parking is very important in relationship to this. I've used sources that are in the final GEG, and they're quoted in here. Some of the quotes are buried in there, but they're all available. I'll pass them to the board if they want it. Parking availability brings people downtown to shop, to do business, and to work. The mayor and city council know that the downtown faces the prime LLC parking deficit. That is why they're considering elaborate signage and parking meters in a clumsy and ill-advised attempt to make up the loss. The city is weak in its computation of parking spaces. They have computed 6 additional spaces after construction, when in reality there will be a deficit of 23 spaces. This is by Fuller, Exhibit A. Additionally, the city neglects to recognize that on-street parking does not substitute for long-term parking. Carl Walker, a city-hired parking specialist, says long-term parking should be replaced by an equal number of off-street long-term parking spaces. The city's plan does not follow this guideline. The city may become a dead zone during the 18 months projected for the construction of the prime building. A severe loss of parking will exist for 1 or 2 years. During this time, businesses will suffer and may close. The GES proposes parking in the city waterfront marina during this time of construction. This is a walking distance of 3,200 feet. Industry standards consider maximum acceptable walking distances of 400 to 1,600 feet. This is by Fuller. The construction is an alarming prospect for this reason alone. The Durkee Street provides 65% of long-term off-street parking. These will not all be replaced, as is stated by Sheridan Gardner, City Council Planning Department. Now this next sentence I crossed out, but I looked at the chart there and I put it back in. It says, since Prime has not shown the floor plan for the below parking ground, there is no way to be confident in the number of spaces that they will actually be available underground. These spaces may be inflated in the GES report. Now moving to the diagonal parking. The proposed diagonal parking in Durkee Street is inflated because of not allowing for code setbacks from the corners. Kenneth Bibbins, Regional Traffic Engineer for the Department of Transportation, says that both Bridge and Durkee Streets do not have sufficient widths to allow angled parking. In his concern for safety, he says, quote, based on the concept of traffic implications, I would use the strongest language if possible to discourage the institution of this change of diagonal parking on Bridge and Durkee Streets. There are additional safety concerns. GEIS does not consider pedestrian walkability, bicycle paths, and safety. The proposed one-way Durkee Street will be deadly to bicycle traffic and unsafe for traffic during deliveries. It is not clear, but shouldn't the setback of the prime building be 5 feet, like the Gateway building, but not 3? Sufficient setback must be a safety issue. We should not be crippling downtown businesses by removing parking to accommodate a large corporate building. The North Country Co-op will be especially hard hit. If the Durkee Street lot is destroyed, patrons will have to carry produce, possibly for blocks, to their car. Aesthetic concerns are that the huge building will be shoehorned into a site that's simply too small to exist comfortably. The immense scale of the prime building will suffocate the open space at the city core and will be in a place for generations to come. So that's my comment on
Thank you
parking.
very much. Thank you. I'm looking for any other raised hands for somebody who'd like to make a comment. Go ahead, come on up.
Hi, my name's Kathy Baumgarten. I live in Plattsburgh. I've lived there. I've been a homeowner for 30 years. I'm a retired military says my husband. And I've been thinking about the Plattsburgh Veterans Bridge. How many people drive over that regularly?
To where?
The Bridge Street Bridge.
Yes.
When you go over that, do you realize that that's only maybe the fourth incarnation of the very bridge that the Battle of Plattsburgh occurred at? British soldiers stood where the Durkee Street parking lot is right now, and they fired cannons right over, and there's a cannonball right on one of those streets right over there. It's a historical area, very historical. And when the Battle of Plattsburgh takes place, when we celebrate that here, where are people gonna park? They're not gonna have anywhere to park, nor for 4th of July activities. And that draws people from out of town, lots of people, it's full. People, I don't know if you know the details about the Battle of Plattsburgh, and maybe some of you don't if you're not from here. It was a wooden bridge originally in 1814, and the British soldiers were coming down from Canada, and they were on this side of the river, which is called the north side of the river. The American soldiers were on what they call the south side of the Saranac River, which is by the marina and over by the base. And the American soldiers pulled up planks out of the bridge. So the bridge was part of our defense so that we won the Battle of Plattsburgh. And they built little mounds of dirt with the boards on it, and they, just like on the cowboy movies, they fired over them and ducked down. And those boards were missing for quite a while. In fact, when the townspeople finally came into town and the Plattsburgh Press Republican started running again, they published in, I think it was in October or November, a sad report that when somebody came into town and they looked down in the river, they saw a dead body because somebody who didn't know that all the boards had been pulled up walked through there at night and fell through. There's a lot of history right there, and when I look at that picture of where that building's gonna be, there's not gonna be any place anymore really, other than that little narrow bit on the McDonough Monument side where you can even look at this bridge. You can't look at it when you're driving over it anymore because of bridge requirements, that there can't be any, those nice, what do they call those? The kids look through and they get their heads stuck looking down. So you just wanna plow over our history. The river walk can't happen. We've been talking about having a nice river walk. They've started it on the other end of town by Stewart's and everything, and it was supposed to meet up right over there. Where's that gonna be? And frankly, I don't think we should be allowing, as a zoning board, any more new construction that close to the river. Because if you look upstream, they're still remediating something that should have been done. I think they started it in 2005, and they're still not really done remediating. I just think we should be allowed to do that. My other concern is about the American with Disabilities Act. Who was here during the snowstorm? This current one? Did you notice how many city sidewalks were not cleared?
Oh, I took pictures.
The city can't clear the Bridge Street Bridge. It's narrow, there's nowhere to throw the snow. I get that. I have seen people in wheelchairs in the street, going through the slush, getting slushed, almost being killed by cars that, didn't, and I don't know, what's the rule? When you're in an electric wheelchair, do you go with traffic or against it? I'm fuzzy on that. But they wanna build this big building there with nowhere to throw the snow, and snow is
Well, and
huge
that is
thing.
part of their
Yeah,
plan that is gonna have to be approved and how they deal with that.
absolutely. I just wanna add something. I'm from Niagara Falls, New York. I lived there in the 1970s when the allure of money from urban renewal caught the eye of our city council. And Niagara Falls, the honeymoon capital of the world, had a beautiful, thriving downtown. It was old. within walking distance of the falls. Somebody got a hold of government money, they plowed down just the equivalent of Margaret Street, and they began digging big holes to put in a big, all kinds of, you can Google Niagara Falls
Mm-hmm.
urban renewal 1970s, you'll find out what happened. The craters were so big downtown of things that were built that weren't finished. I used to kid tourists coming over from Niagara Falls, Ontario, that we were at war with Canada. Then they believed me, because these holes were there forever. They corrected, they built big box buildings, trying to big brick, and they're still empty, and the downtown is completely shuttered and full of crime. The number of
Okay.
empty homes that the cities had to pay to tear down is phenomenal. Already in Plattsburgh, if you go up Tom Miller Road, that's become the new Route 3. I mean, they're putting stuff up already.
Okay.
So I'm warning you.
Right.
The only thing downtown Plattsburgh has is parking, you know, and without it, it's much faster, zipping up Tom Miller, going
Okay,
Route 3.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Next, come on up.
Good evening. I'm Laura Palkovic, I'm the other Palkovic. And I live a little bit uptown on Champlain Street. And before I say what I want to say about this, I want to ask Turner, you talked about the parking spaces that are going to be in with the Prime. How many of those are going to be designated handicap parking?
This is a,
Go ahead, I can't hear you, so.
well, I don't know that this is for me to comment.
That's okay, you can say, if you know, do you know how many are gonna be handicap parking spaces?
The required number of it will be
Right.
parked in conformance with the ADA.
It's a ratio.
Okay, and will it allow for the extra width that's needed for vans that discharge?
Yep.
And is that figured into the number of parking spaces you're gonna have?
It is.
So that you won't be losing spaces by adding the handicap parking?
Yeah, they're shown on their plan,
They do have, it. Okay, I didn't know, and it wasn't.
with the van space and everything.
And it wasn't addressed
Yeah.
in this part. My other question is, the project that was done in Saratoga Springs, you said it was 54 units. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm here to
No,
let
I
you.
know, I just need
Wait,
that
what's it,
information. I
I
just
can't, what's the question? Ask
I just
me.
need that information. Well, because but it's a total 54 units, right?
What,
So, maybe I can clarify, what we'll do is, we'll listen to everyone's comments, and then we're going to answer everyone's comments in writing.
Okay, but I just want to have that clear, because you said there were 3 buildings. And is that 54 units in each building, or 54 units total for all those buildings?
So, we
But I need to-
understand the question and we'll
Okay, my
respond
question
to it.
is, if it's 54 buildings total at that project, why are we being told that Prime has to do 115
I,
units?
that, again, that's not our
I
jurisdiction.
know it isn't, but I just want to get that out
That's
there.
not our jurisdiction.
I just want to get
can't-
that out there.
I understand
Okay,
that.
so anyway,
That's a different question. Why we're told what they can do or not do here is, and what they did in Saratoga, the only reason they're talking about Saratoga has nothing to do with the finances of the project or what they need to do. It's only talking about how many spaces they use.
yeah, and I understand that, but
So,
that struck.
I get it, yeah,
I mean,
I'm
that
just,
struck
it's
me.
okay.
Okay, so anyway, what I'm gonna talk about is get here on sort of the ground floor of what a lot of other people are probably gonna wanna tell you. I went down to the co-op on Saturday, and when I came out, I stood out and I was on Bridge Street, and I was looking down at Durkee parking, and I was trying to imagine what it's gonna look like if this building goes in. Okay? And I know that in the report, some of the questions were about the height of this building, 5 stories. And the point was made that there are some buildings downtown that are 5 stories high, and a couple of them are across the street on Durkee Street. But there is no single building down there that has the height, the width, the length, the depth, in short, the mass of this apartment building.
Mhm.
It is going to be a very different building from the other buildings that define the character of downtown Plattsburgh. Okay? So it's massive. It's gonna dwarf everything around it. It's like nothing that else we have down here. Now, it said also that the building was going to provide additional retail space. And I thought that was pretty laughable because we have enough retail space in Plattsburgh right now. We just don't have the businesses to fill it. So why put some more empty space down in a big building like that when we can't fill what we have in downtown Plattsburgh, along Margaret Street, along Brinkerhoff Street, Clinton Street, Broad Street, Oak Street? Why don't we make those sites more conducive to bringing in retail? We also talked about a restaurant. Well, when the Gateway went in, one of the draws was the restaurant, Nicole's. Nicole's came in, it was there for about a year, it left, and it stayed empty for a good 10 years. Nobody else came in. And it didn't get filled until they decided to move the Glens Falls Bank down there so they could make room for the Arnie Pavone Memorial Parking Pavilion. So I'm not sure that this idea that this is going to draw retail and draw restaurants and draw more people down, when our history shows that something like that comes in and it goes and it stays gone. So I have that is my concern with that. So basically, all I'm going to say is that you put that building there, it's going to destroy the character of our town. It's going to stick out like a big bloated gouty toe.
Okay.
And that's what I have to say.
Go ahead. Come on up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Zoning Board of Appeals members. My name is Kevin Farrington. Just a little bit about me. I administered the planning board for 15 years here. I've been on the Zoning Board of Appeals for 18 years. I've been to extensive planning board training, zoning board training, and I even taught at several of those training sessions myself. And I just, in that context, I'd like to say that thank you. I appreciate what you do. I do it, I've done it for a long time. It's a difficult job, and this job is particularly difficult. But I do it personally because I believe that autonomous boards separated from political influence, totally divorced from political influence, are a critical part of a community. And so you, I think, are doing a community service, and I thank you for that. As it relates to this particular project, I would also say that, and I won't ask anybody, but if any elected official or person tried to influence your vote, just know that that's a contamination of a process that I hold quite sacred. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Shatner, because he straightened out a lot of things that have been missaid in this very room. He did it very astutely, and so I won't repeat it. I will point out this, though. You, Scott mentioned the shell game. You, my friends, have a difficult job, made more difficult by your lack of support. What do I mean by that? In the December 19th letter to you from the Community Development Office, you were told that the finding statement is binding on you. Last month, at this table, you were told by Prime Development Corporation representatives that the finding statement is binding on you. Of course, as Mr. Shatner astutely pointed out, it's not. You write your own finding statement. You are required to do so under the secret law. One of the things that makes this particularly difficult for you is the fact that this property is a public asset. So whereas normally you can just sit back and go, well, geez, we got somebody who's got a parcel of land and they want to build. Does it meet code? Does it fit? Maybe they own the property, maybe they're buying the property, whatever. It's not an issue. The support, which I mentioned earlier, tried to convince the planning board of this early on. They said, whoa, you don't need to think about the whole DRI. You could just look at the Turkey Street parking lot. Just look at that and put the blinders up. Well, thankfully, the concerned citizens who pointed out that that would be illegal, the city stepped back. They brought in the astute Mr. Shackner, and who quickly guided them. Whoa, you almost screwed up big time. You can't do that. That's called segmentation, and you can't do it. The planning board can't, and neither can you. What does that mean to you? That means that the application that you have before you, you can't limit your view to just, frankly, all due respect, this application is so sorely incomplete. You think you've seen this, 5, 6, 7 times now? You haven't seen an application. It never should have made the agenda. I appreciate bringing it forward for public comment, informational meeting, and I understand the value in that. However, be very weary of the wear and down approach, because that's what developers like to do. Well, you've seen it 4, 5, 6, 7 times. Anybody have any new comments? You have not seen the application. You haven't seen where the compensatory parking goes. You haven't seen any plans. You haven't even seen a full list of on-site plans, let alone everything else. If I were to ask you, where's the compensatory parking, can you tell me? And if you look at the flaws, ask yourself this question. If I know the compensatory parking is flawed, can I approve this anyways? Now, one of the things on your list that Ron pointed out is parking. Okay. That's not just your site, that is compensatory parking downtown. Can I approve this and know in a year, in 10 years, in 20 years, that I am not gonna screw up downtown? Can you say that? If you can find a flaw in their compensatory parking plan, would you still approve it? Let me point a couple of them out to you. Mr. Ferris, I showed him the plans. You've got parking in front of his garage base. Oh, well, don't worry. We'll take those out. It's just a little minor little fix-up. Now, keep in mind, too, that when this development agreement came in, they said, we are going to provide on-site supply for all our demand. That's what they told us. They said, we're going to have a bunch of commercial, but don't worry about that. And we asked the question because we saw this coming from a mile away. Okay, how much of that is restaurant? Because the restaurant is 5 times the number of parking demand. So they did what usually the slick move, what every developer likes to do. First they said, we're going to comply with your code. Then they realize they don't. They go, oh, you know what, your code is old. That code doesn't really make that much sense. We've got numbers. So the first thing they do is they go to the NTIS, National Transportation Institute standards. We got national standards. This is fine. So that's the first step. Then they go, oh, we got an apartment building over here. There's no factual information. They make claims. It's a very easy move to do. Developers try it all the time. Guess what? It doesn't work except on suckers. Don't be a sucker. And this idea that we would change our parking demand for a restaurant from 1 per 50 square foot to 1 per 300, that's outrageous. One of the standards that Scott's described that should be a condition of approval is that you comply with our local parking zoning code, period, okay? That's number one. Second of all, so that's the parking issue. Here's one flaw I started to say. They rely on the Arnie Pavone parking lot. So they built a lot with 100 spaces, 100 and some odd spaces. Great. Their second most important spot is the county building. So they want to boast 65 new spaces. Look at the list. It says 65 spaces. Do you want to know how many open public visitor parking spaces there were there before they did any renovation? And by the way, Clinton County's laughing their way all the way to the bank. They got a nice chunk of change for redoing their parking lot. There were 44 public parking spaces over there. Now there's 61. They added, or 61. They added 19 spaces. This 65 business and any parking spaces that go for employees are totally irrelevant. They don't count. Why? The county parking lot has an overflow parking lot. The county building has an overflow parking lot most of you are familiar with over on Oak Street. The employees who don't get there early gotta park over there. They don't like it, they gotta walk across the street. It's filled. They wish they could park in the parking lot. Guess what? That overflow parking lot is not in the parking district. So attracting people from outside the district into the district, guess what? You can't count that as your increase in public parking spaces. I could go on, I'm trying to be brief, I'll move on. You can see though, the point being, the parking plan is critically and fatally flawed, and more importantly, you don't even know what it is. You haven't seen it. And you can't approve this without that. One of the conditions should be what Mr. Pelkovic pointed out, which is what's in the Carl Walker parking plan, which is long-term off-street parking should be replaced with long-term off-street parking. Period. That should be a condition of the SUP approval. If you want to be sure, now if you do that, you can be sure there won't be an adverse impact. If you do those two things, there won't be an adverse impact, at least from the aspect of the parking question. Now, there's other questions at play. One of them is with respect to the massing of the building, and that's an important one. So, the criteria is, is it in keeping with the surrounding architecture, size, and mass? If I were to ask you, what's the finished floor elevation of the new building? Don't know, right? Don't feel bad. They didn't tell you. So how would you know? How does it compare, in the GEIS, it was asked that you do a complete inventory of surrounding architecture, height, and, they didn't think they needed to. That's the lead agency drawing their own criteria. You're an autonomous board that can draw yours. Most council members don't necessarily know what an SUP is. You do. You understand the criteria, evaluating height and so forth. That might be something that's important to you. They didn't provide any elevation drawings. They provide these really lovely, when I catch little fish, I hold it out in front of the camera like this and they look big. You got a lot of those kind of pictures. It's really deceiving. But do you have an inventory? Do you have elevation drawings that show what this building looks like next door to the buildings that are there now? One of the things you'll notice is that the buildings that are there now have a row house style architecture. Now, if you look at the road slopes. It's on a hill. So the corner of the building's at the top of the hill. Durkee Street goes down 10 feet. So when you look at a two-story building at the top of the road, it's 10 feet higher than a two-story building on the bottom of the road. And as you walk down the road, each of the doors are lower, 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 lower. So by the time you get to that Maui North, that's 10 feet lower door threshold. Actually, that one has stairs, but that's 10 feet lower, the one next to it, than the affordable furniture at the top of the hill. Even more so on Bridge Street, which goes down 13 feet. This building, however, is 300 feet long going down Durkee Street. So where you start at Durkee, it stays at elevation. So you're not comparing a 6-story, to 2 and 3 stories. You're comparing a 6-story with a finished floor elevation that's 10 and 13 feet higher. It's almost like a 7-story in that sense, relative to the other buildings. If you don't know that, again, don't feel bad. They didn't provide that for you. And what's worse, you're an island. You're left standing alone. You're not getting the support that you deserve to help you with a critical, objective evaluation. Now, I am quite sure their team of high-priced lawyers is going to write a very compelling letter that discounts everything I say and that promotes the interests of prime development. I am quite sure the very very capable engineers and architects who work for Prime Development are gonna do the same thing. They're gonna advocate for their client, because that's their job. But who's helping you? Because the only person I can see is the one who is misguiding you and trying to downplay the zoning board's influence and to try to get you to brush it under the rug. And that's what the history we've seen. So what does that elevation look like? Let's take a look. So this is Turkey Street. And you can see this is the building right here. So that's what it looks like. That's 65 feet. In fact, I drew it at 60. It's actually 5 feet higher. That's what that building looks like in our downtown. Now you look at that and you tell me, you read the criteria for height and building mass, and you try to tell me with a straight face that this building is compatible with this row house style building. Now you notice affordable's up here, and then it drops down. That's at about 130 elevation, that's about 127, it goes down to 125, and down here is 122. And if I kept going and you saw the ICV building over here, you'd see that that's even lower, and this even towers over that ICV building because of the fact that the ICV building is down at the bottom of the hill. And this isn't row house style architecture. This stays one elevation for 300 feet. So you can all see what the massing is, and you can see what that looks like. That's what that building is gonna look like on your city block. Okay? That's what that looks like. Bridge Street's even worse, because on Bridge Street, it goes down 13 feet. So if you notice these doors, starts up here at the clothing store and goes down, so by the time you're at the co-op, you're down around 123, 122, 118. That's 12 feet, almost 13 feet lower. So this 6-story building here is actually just absolutely towering over the, the row house style that are going down the hill. So one of the conditions might be that, do a row house style architecture. Do a series of smaller buildings. Because clearly, this building, I challenge anybody to argue that this building is compatible with that street block. It can't be done. I don't care how many high-priced lawyers and engineers and architects they have, it can't be done. There's no way that that building is compatible on that block. And you can't say it is, and I will talk to you all night long, meet me outside, we'll have a discussion, and we'll chat about that till midnight if you want to. I dare anybody. Ron, thank you. I will wrap it up, except if I may make one last comment. Health and safety, your last criteria is health and safety. That 60-foot, and again, very spacious and expansive rendering that they provided you. The Saranac River Trail walkway along the river is a narrow walkway along a wooded riverbank. The drawings are a little bit deceptive. If you believe that this is harmonious for the health and safety of the community, then all the people, men, women alike, have yourselves and your daughter walk down that narrow corridor with a 65-foot wall next to you after dark. Okay. So if you think this is in keeping and promotes a good character and health and safety of the community as you're required to do, then plan on, once it's built, please do me the favor of promising that you will have your loved ones walk down that alley after dark. We call it Danger Alley. Again, I thank you for your time and listening to me and for your service. I appreciate it.
We will, Kevin, can you send me those as a PDF? Can you send those to Joe, actually, as a PDF, those?
Yes, thank you, Ron, I certainly will.
My question is on the graphic. Those windows there showing the each level.
Right.
Okay, so I couldn't see it very well. It is immense.
Okay.
It's immense. Yeah, good word.
Thank you. Go ahead, Sylvie.
Hello, good evening to you all. My name is Sylvie Beaudreau. I live here in Plattsburgh on Leonard Avenue. Could I have the picture projected of the new version that is the Bridge Street view from the side? the
Look up
newest
there.
version? Yeah, thank you so much. I'd like to address all of you on all these important issues, and I'm really thankful that you're holding this meeting and taking your precious time to come here tonight and listen to our concerns. I wanted to start with the standards for the special use permits and just go through each one of them one by one. And I made several comments about the style of the building, the general character of it. And I can just confirm what Kevin is saying about the overwhelming size of this building. If you look at Margaret Street, at the area of Margaret Street that corresponds to Durkee Street, where this building is being proposed, there's about 12 separate units of row style housing. So based on that comparison, I would say that this proposed building is about 10 times larger than the average downtown row house. I addressed certain concerns about the look of the building, that it looks very bland. It looks like a big box unit to me. It reminds me of, I call it like the Walmart of housing, because it's really huge and big and bland. I'm sorry if that sounds offensive to you, but I feel it doesn't really fit in very well with the pre-existing streetscape. I also, the description of the building was that a major effort had been made to have the building conform to the style or the look of downtown Plattsburgh, which is a kind of 19th century Victorian look with cornices over windows. There's all kinds of carving if you look at the pre-existing buildings. And the response to my comments were that the building was indeed in keeping with the architectural look of the city, and I still don't see it. So if you guys can point out to me the features of the building in detail that correspond to anything that looks like Plattsburgh, I'd be really happy to see that. I'm really worried about the fake cornices, because the earlier renditions had actual modern looking cornices, curved, and now what we see is like a shelf with sort of sticks holding it up. So it's, I don't know, it just looks like maybe an inexpensive way of producing a cornice-like structure. So I'm just going to repeat what Kevin said about the overwhelming size of it. And I'm going to also going to relate to what Kathy said about Niagara Falls, that Plattsburgh as a downtown, one could say that it doesn't have much to offer. It's not a big city. It doesn't have the glamour, and it doesn't have the pizzazz or the sizzle of a large metropolitan area. But what it does have is quaintness. It has a kind of human scale. It has like small, kind of cozy looking buildings. And especially along Durkee Street, you see a kind of chaotic assemblage of 19th century buildings, and they're all different colors, and it's kind of pleasing to the eye. And I think that this building doesn't really, it kind of stands out, or like a sore thumb, I think someone said, that it doesn't really fit in with the existing streetscape. Point number 2, as to the provision of open space, the original DRI was calling for at least 1 acre of open space, and frankly, there is no more open space at all. And this development is not providing us with a riverside walk. The riverside walk is already there. What it's doing is putting, as Kevin pointed out, a 60-foot wall next to the river walk. And if you look at this rendition, what you're looking at is the parking garage. And what the mock-up has cleverly done is put a series of very small trees in a line to sort of, I don't know what that is, if it's a hedge or something, but it's essentially there to disguise the fact that it's going to be a blind wall. So there will be no egress from this alley, because as you know, as you go straight through it, it doesn't lead to Broad Street currently. There's no way, it doesn't go anywhere. It goes behind the farmer's market building, which is a really scary place to walk. No one ever goes there, right? Especially no one would go there at night. So essentially, I just wanna ask you, who's gonna wanna walk there? When there's no open space, there's nothing there to look at but a blind wall. How is that a public amenity of any kind of value to the people of Plattsburgh? So I'm still looking for the open space and the treatment of grounds. And can I also ask, looking at this, I don't see a sidewalk on Upper Bridge Street, on the south side of the street. I see trees planted in the middle of that. There's a wide sidewalk where the bridge is, but then it seems to disappear there, and there's nowhere for people to walk. So what about the idea of a walkable downtown? It seems, I don't know, to me, there's a problem there. The sidewalk is taken up with small trees, no place for wheelchairs, people to walk. That looks like a major problem to me. As to point number 3, as to the general fitness of the structure for its use or proposed location, I'm extremely concerned, I'm going to echo what others have said about the lack of a need for more retail space in Plattsburgh, or even in the town of Plattsburgh. As many of you know, North American cities are undergoing what people are calling the retail apocalypse. The internet, Amazon.com, has had a dramatic effect on people shopping in bricks and mortar stores. And so I'm really concerned that we're building more retail space when we already have we already have about 30 retail spaces that aren't being filled. So over the summer, I undertook to count the number of empty retail spaces in downtown Plattsburgh, not downtown, the whole city. And didn't count the town, because the town also has a lot of empty, I don't have place here on my podium, sorry, it's all slipping. So basically, I'm gonna respectfully submit to the zoning board my list of the 33 empty retail spaces, many of which are directly proximate to Durkee Street. They're opposite where this building is being proposed, or they're on City Hall Place. So they're right in the vicinity of Durkee Street. So I'm gonna submit this list. The list is subject to change because as time goes on, people come in, people come out, but there's always around 30 empty retail spaces. So some people would argue that, well, you know, we're gonna build these apartments and so many people are gonna move in that they're gonna create demand for retail spaces. And if that's true, then maybe what that would do would fill the pre-existing empty retail spaces. But I would also like to respectfully submit to all of you an image of another similar big box development that brought lots of tenants in, and I want you to see what happened to the retail space. This picture was taken 2 weeks ago. Does anyone recognize it? It's not a test. Anyone recognize it? It's Winooski, Vermont. And it's called Spinner Place. And basically, similar idea of a corporate developer coming in and building. These are student apartments. It's sort of like the Broad Street Commons that we have here in Plattsburgh. And what you'll notice, it's right on the roundabout. It's in the busiest part of Winooski. And what you notice is that the ground level retail shops are empty. And there's paper in the windows. So I want to go on record today to say that if this thing gets built, I want you all to remember that on February 10th, 2020, I warned you that if we build this retail space, they will not come. It will be empty, like Nicola's restaurant that was empty for 10 years. Why have all the people living in this building not generated business for these retail spaces? Why are they empty? I would respectfully submit to you that this will happen if we do this here. And by the way, if you Google Spinner Place, you'll find out that they had trouble filling the apartments and continue to have trouble filling them, and they have vacancy issues. All right, so I'm really concerned that Plattsburgh. So you, as the zoning board, are looking to assess the fitness of the structure to its proposed location. Does Plattsburgh need more high-income housing? I would argue that Plattsburgh needs affordable housing. So in view of the retail apocalypse, I think we already have an empty storefront problem in Plattsburgh, and I think this is only gonna make it worse. And I don't think any national retailers are gonna come and set up on Durkee Street, so I'll stop with that. No, I won't stop, but I'll go on to the next point. No need for new retail space. As to the provision of automobile parking or storage, I'm very concerned about that. Apparently the 50-space lot that Prime is gonna build, next to the building, they're gonna get space, and they're gonna build a parking lot that'll have 50 spaces available to the public. But it turns out that they're gonna be spaces that Prime is gonna charge for. So it'll be paid parking, so Prime's gonna make some money off of that as well. So that won't be long-term parking for people who work for the Department of Social Services. So the issue of parking has already been discussed, so I'm concerned about that. And then lastly, and I'm most concerned by this, those of us who live and who work in this town drive on Durkee Street on a regular basis, and we observe things that maybe the experts don't pick up on. But Durkee Street is one of the busiest delivery streets in our city. Because lots of restaurants are on Margaret Street and they need their alcohol and food deliveries done. And there are trucks that are double parked there to deliver the food and the alcohol for the restaurants that are on Margaret Street. There are UPS trucks, there are FedEx trucks, there's traffic double parked in both directions. So I just want to show you some random pictures that were taken by people that are friends of mine. And they're just typical days, and someone took this from her dashboard. I won't reveal who she is, but I guess she was waiting to get through. So this is on Durkee Street, and the top picture shows that there's a Cisco truck, and then you'll see that there's a UPS truck that is stopped, and there's another delivery truck in the back. So, and the bottom picture shows garbage removal, double park, and you can see that there's a car that's gone into the opposing lane to try to get around it. Because when people double park on a 2-lane street, people can go around it, it's dangerous, but they can do it. But in this case, if we turn it into a one-way street, where are the large trucks going to park to deliver the food and the beverages for the restaurants that are backing onto that street? I don't think Durkee Street will work as a one-way street, is what I'm trying to say. The top picture has 3 different trucks parked at one moment, and it's like that all day long. So I ask you that question. How do we turn this into a one-way street? How's that gonna work? Once these trucks come to deliver their stuff on a one-way street, if they're double parked, like in the bottom picture, it's just gonna block the street. So that's another one of my concerns that hasn't really been thought through. All right, so with that, I will respectfully stop, and I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to my concerns. Thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead first. I'll get you next.
I'm going to be quick. Clearly, according to what everyone else has already said, this project doesn't fit the criteria that it's meant to fit. My objection is that this is new construction. It's a blank slate. They should adhere to all code and zoning as any other new construction project in the city. I'm a real estate developer. I adhere to all the codes out of respect for the city. They're there for a reason. So they should follow the same codes. If they can't, then it should be built smaller or not built at all. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Joan Jansen. I live in the city of Plattsburgh, and I just a little bit wanted to get on the slipstream here of some of the things that were said about delivery. And Jill, would you go back to the picture of the ground layout? The kind of, yeah, right there. Okay, one of the concerns that I have, and especially given that I heard this evening 24 The aisle width for parking is 24 feet and the city requires 26. I took a look at this and I thought, okay, delivery for this building, you would end up coming in here if you were a truck, and sometimes deliveries happen for semis that are semi-trucks. So you'd come in up into the parking lot, you'd make a left-hand turn, you'd go around the civic space, you'd make another left-hand turn, you'd make another left-hand turn, and you would have to back your truck into that loading space, which is really a challenge. I would say even if you were an outstanding backer as an 18-wheeler, chances are, at some point in time, some poor person who is handicapped and who happens to be parked their van in one of those spaces might just end up with their bumper taken off. So how delivery trucks that are big vehicles, and a lot of them are 18-wheelers that deliver for restaurants, how they're going to get in and deliver to that space, I don't know. And it makes me really uncomfortable to hear that the aisles are even smaller than they're supposed to be. Bridge Street Commons had been mentioned by quite a few people, and the massing of this thing is a problem. And if you haven't gone up and just walked around the Bridge Street Commons and taken a look at it or driven up close by it, I encourage you to do so because it will feel overwhelming. It feels, and then if you go around to the back of it and you see how much parking is available back there, you're gonna say, my goodness, where are they gonna put all these cars? Niagara Falls came up. I worked at Niagara University for a while, which is in Lewis, which is just north of Niagara Falls. We called it the Big Ditch, and I'm really happy to be back here in the Adirondacks instead because it's not such a pleasant place. It's not such a pleasant place because the city of Niagara Falls mistakenly thought in their urban renewal that putting in these big buildings was the way to go. And now their economy is being propped up by an Indian casino, and I don't expect that to happen in Plattsburgh, but let's just keep our fingers crossed that that's not part of it. Have any of you been to, and I'll open this up to anybody, have anybody been to Niagara on the Lake? Not Niagara Falls, Niagara on the Lake.
Beautiful.
Okay, beautiful place. Has anybody been to Williamsburg, Virginia? Few people to Williamsburg, Virginia. Okay, my contention is part of what makes those places so special is that they are the human scale. You feel comfortable walking around. There's enough detail on all the buildings, in part because they are historic, so they've got lots of things to look at. And they're also not overpowering. Now, I expect to go overpowered to be overpowered when I walk downtown When I walk in New York City, Boston, some other large metropolitan area, it's okay with me if there are skyscrapers. I think one of the really big mistakes that Burlington made, and they now have a giant open pit that's waiting to get filled, is that they didn't understand that part of the charm of Church Street is the fact that it is not overwhelming. Yeah, the buildings are tall, but like Plattsburgh, they are individual buildings that have something to offer architecturally of interest. If we expect to keep visitors coming to Plattsburgh, we do need that parking. We have our 4th of July, and I'm really pleased that we do live in a historic region. And I would say that what is being proposed here, and I agree, we haven't really seen the end of it, but is not in keeping with the historic nature of the city, which is a valuable asset. It's a resource. And we're going to ruin it if we put something massive in that place right now. Thank you.
My name's Alan Booth. I'm here tonight reflecting on this project, having basically worn 3 hats in this study area. One is a business owner. Booth Insurance is celebrating its 102nd birthday at 20 Brickroff Street. My second hat is I was a member of the City Planning Board for 20 years, chairman for 10. And thirdly, in 1995, then Mayor Rabideau appointed a downtown future planning commission. I was selected as chairman. We had a group of 9, we'll call them stakeholders, local stakeholders, property owners. I'll read their names: Robin Kaiser, owner of Maui North; Mark McCullough, an engineer on Clinton Street; John McKenna, the architect on Oak Street; David Merkel, property owner on Margaret Street; Chris Rotella, city councilor; Rosemary Schoonmaker, the community development director; John Seaton, real estate broker, real estate developer downtown, still is; and Dan Stewart, then a city councilor, obviously later mayor of the city of Plattsburgh. We met for 6 months, 25 meetings, public hearings, and we developed this very, in my opinion, I've done a lot of work. This is one of the best pieces of work that I was a part of as a team member. We were stakeholders. We engaged the local stakeholders in preparing this report. Now, this is 25 years ago, and I reflect when this new DRI project came up, my first reaction was, why don't they just open up this report from 25 years ago? It's somewhat timeless. Look at the things that weren't done. They still are apropos. Put a price tag on, and let's spend the millions or whatever to accomplish what we dreamed of and thought of 25 years ago. The stakeholders, we engaged the local stakeholders downtown. Who are the stakeholders? Business owners, building owners, employees, customers, habitational tenants, and visitors. And you know what? 25 years later, the stakeholders are the same. The stakeholders are not some out-of-town people that come in to tell us what is good for Plattsburgh, New York. We know what's good for Plattsburgh, New York. And I'd like to get into this report, 25 years old, as I said, but we had a number of priority goals. And number 6, I'll read it: to improve the appearance and utility of the Durkee Street parking lot as the primary parking facility for visitors to and business people of downtown Plattsburgh. I'd like to emphasize that again. To improve the appearance and utility of the Durkee Street parking lot as a primary parking facility for visitors and the business people of downtown Plattsburgh. That was our vision 25 years ago. I firmly believe it's the vision that we need to sustain today. Second of all, we talked about two-way streets. One of our priority topics was, I'll read it: to improve traffic flow downtown and increase access to downtown businesses by changing vehicle direction allowed on 2 downtown streets. I don't know how many people remember, Margaret Street was one way at the time of our study. We recommended Margaret Street go from one way to 2-way from Broad Street to Court Street. In my opinion, to change Durkee Street from 2-way to 1-way is truly short-sighted. Our vision 25 years ago liked 2-way streets. Another of our priority recommendations, number 9, I will read it: to better capitalize on the Saranac River as an attractive asset to downtown by increasing access to and the image of the river. In other words, we said, please, public, look to the Saranac as a real asset. My opinion that these gigantic buildings will do exactly opposite that. They will cut off access to the Saranac River. As far as the parking goes, I'd like the zoning board to think of a empty space There's 3.5 acres, approximately 150,000 square feet there, 300 parking spaces, give or take. This project says, okay, stakeholders, visitors, employees, we're gonna take away those parking spaces. You're gonna have to find another parking space somewhere else downtown. Now, if you think of the city downtown, it's somewhat of an island, accessed by two bridges, Bridge Street, Kennedy Bridge. And the ingress and egress to the downtown is truly enhanced by the location and sustainability of this parking lot. Look at the snow situation we encountered this weekend. To drive the parking on a snow day and other days up into the, further into the center city is not a good plan. Whether it be to the Ernie Pavone lot, county parking lot, this is just not what we envisioned and what I think is important for the city. Putting on my planning board hat, one of the planning board 101 things that I really remember is, think of the 3.5 acre lot as a vacant piece of property. 3.5 acres, approximately 150,000 square feet. There's a simple equation. Building footprint plus parking footprint plus green space, open space equals 100% of the property. I accessed the schematics that were presented last month to you folks, and I truly believe that the open space is truly deficient. I think a lot of what the schematics are showing is open space, is really riverbank and trees along the Saranac. That's not open space that is conducive to tenants, habitational facilities. I think that the tenants deserve true, good, open space.
Okay.
Lastly, I'd like to say that I'm not adverse to building habitational downtown. I like to think of myself as a problem solver, and this habitational building process has a very easy solution, in my opinion, having been a planning board guy and thinking about walking around downtown. And that is, yeah, if you want to build habitational, let's go to the rail yard at the D&H. If I were a tenant, better view of the lake, more open space, and or use the to-be vacant property for the Glens Falls Bank is. But keep the Turkey Street parking lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to reiterate what Kim Bortnick said. I'm also a representative for Easy Properties, and my family is a developer in the city. And I would implore you to follow all of the rules that you have put forth on us for all the years that we've been doing planning in the city. And then I'm also concerned about parking. I do, as a property manager here in the city for the most recent project that was developed at market rates. We have 1, 2, and 3 bedroom apartments there. One parking spot for, I'm assuming they're also gonna do 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms. You know, you get a 2-bedroom apartment with 2 nurses in it, which is what I have, and then they all of a sudden each have a boyfriend, and now you've got 6 cars or 4 cars. I just had one the other day. He had his vehicle, her vehicle, and his work vehicle, which the snowstorm came, and I literally had to call the number on the side of the work vehicle to say, you gotta move it because I need to plow. I realize they're gonna have underground parking, so plowing probably won't be as much of an issue, but parking is an issue in apartment buildings. Thank you.
Next. Any other public comments? Go ahead.
Oh, I'm real comfortable. I'm currently have a back issue.
Yeah, okay.
All right. Unlike everybody else in this room, I think I'm different. This is the first zoning board meeting I've ever been to. Has everybody else been to one before? Yeah, so that's new to me. What you're doing, I'm paying attention to and bringing an open mind to it. You guys aren't paid, are you?
No.
No. So that makes me realize another simple way of understanding this room. There's people here who are paid to be here, who are making a living being here. Some of them have ties on, some of them don't. The rest of us are just citizens. Okay, that's why we're here. You guys are serving the city, and the rest of us care about the city. I think you did a wonderful job at the beginning of saying clearly what you're here for and what you're not here for. I commend you on that, and if I understand it, there's 5 issues with a seeker and there's 2 special permits. That's all you're here for, right? You're not here to make up for the mistakes of others. I understand that. And I listened to all the very highly qualified speakers and people who have done this and know so much. I claim to know very little, okay? I do claim to care about the city of Plattsburgh. One thing Kevin mentioned was zoning boards are separate from politics. They're not Republican, they're not Democrats. There might be some tendency to fill up with those at different times. But you're here for a different reason, the way I see it. You're here to protect the stakeholders, which has been the same throughout the last 25 years or so. That hasn't changed. You're here to be the safety net, separate from politics, okay? You're here as a public service. So with all these thoughts in my mind, I started paying attention to the first people who spoke. Well, it is not unusual for people to do math calculations to make them favor what they want. That is pretty standard in our society. People do the math they want. So it's important as critical thinkers to follow the math. When I listened about a Hamlet project and how it was representative of downtown, us, the only thing I saw that was common was the number 50 of residential. When they went and described the setting, they literally described a different setting than what we're in. Let's work on those numbers and how arbitrary and convenient they can be. 1.5 per residential. That's a national thing, that's a state thing, it's in the rules, whatever. It's an average, it's a standard. Well, I'm going to tell you, as the lady made clear who's managing property, if it's 1 bedroom, there might be 1 or 2 people sleeping in it. If they're swingers, there's 3 of them. There might be 3 cars, okay? But now you put a 2nd bedroom in there. There's a higher probability there's gonna be more cars. You put a 3rd bedroom in there. So what I'm gonna tell you, and when I was speaking to some people earlier today, that was one of the first questions they asked me about this. I said, I don't know much, I'm about to learn. So 1.5 is not going to represent everything conveniently. The other thing is, there was another tragic flaw in their example, okay? I want you to find it. I was disappointed that you were not asking questions, okay? I'll let you find it. I was glad to hear that your statement is meant to be independent and separate and can be different from those who have made mistakes. If you're just here to mimeograph their statement, well, then you're really not serving your independent purpose, separate from politics and as the safety net, as a public service, what I assume you're all here for, because you're volunteering. So, I recognize the 7 things where you're supposed to focus on, the 2 special things, the 5 things in the seeker. Well, somewhere in there is the word character. If you haven't been given enough information to realize that this is affecting the character of this community, of this city, and that it is in your responsibility, in your jurisdiction, that's what's concerning me here. Please, please, don't mimeograph. Don't be like. Be what you're supposed to be, the extra thinker, okay? The character, protecting that public asset, that waterfront, that river. I love some of the great examples you guys gave. I wish I knew that much. Human scale. Now, you are protecting the public asset, the environment of the city, the character of the city. It can either be created or destroyed. People with good ideas and good intentions or whatever, they can make mistakes. I believe there's been enough told to you about what's destroying this public asset. I believe you've been told we really don't need more of that housing and we do need some green space. Not your issue. Okay, you only got those 7 things you told me. I am saying that character alone. Now, what are some other ways the character is being affected besides the human scale? Well, the city and the local area has been receiving liberal funds from the state. Okay, good old state handing us down money. Cuomo wants the North Country vote. We're going to get some money. We lost Stafford, but at least Cuomo's going to come in there for us. Give us all that grant money. So we've got money for complete streets. Kevin, the city did a pretty good job with that when they did stuff. We've gotten money for the Heritage Trail. These are health and safety categories, okay? To just throw out the intentions that have been accepted for the Heritage Trail, to not make the streets complete and safe as people who know more details than I do. That is your responsibility on the zoning board. You do have a major role here. I don't know what your background is, what yours is, or any of you. Don't know a single thing. All I could do is look at you and see how you're listening. You're not asking questions. That concerns me. If I give a presentation and nobody asks any questions, that either means I did an excellent job and they know everything, or they're clueless. Now I ask you, you know your own backgrounds. You know the people who are coming up here presenting to you. You know what they want. Today you got to hear what the people want. And I encourage you to step up to your responsibility and listen to the experts in this room who weren't being paid to be here. I thank you for your time, and I hope I'm not boring any of you. Okay? Hey, at least some of you have human expression. Okay? That's a start. Start caring about what's going to happen to downtown Plattsburgh. How the carpetbaggers are coming in and we're selling out. I still ain't figured out why. But we will figure it out. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments at this point? If not, I'm going to, I'm adjourning this public comment period and public hearing. which means that it will continue again at our next meeting, which is in March. Okay?
Thank you all very much.
Hey, ladies, do you know what a mimeograph is?
Well, I didn't have it first yet. Pass these around. Thank you all.
Thank you.
I know you know.
What? What if I said no before my time?
My name's Joe McMahon.
Take it off and you smell it.
That was interesting.
Don't go tying yourself to me, buddy.
Joe, I just wanted to say hello. You can say no, but I'll say hello. Joe's a good man.
Depends who you ask.
Anybody who says differently, let me know.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right. We might as well, I'd like to, let's talk about, Viola's home. Okay. Planning board has requested,
Should we ask,
Yeah.
should we maybe ask them to take it outside?
Yeah, ask them to take it outside.
You want me to ask?
I will.
Joe,
Excuse me, we still have a meeting going on here, if you would please.
Just a couple more
No,
things we
have
gotta do.
other
Thank
items.
you.
Thank you.
My God, you're
I
mean.
don't know what you're here.
My wife tells me the same thing. That's why when it comes to dealing with students at school, she says, I'll take care of it, you stay out of it. It's like, okay, sorry. I was
Okay,
gonna say it was
so,
successful.
Viola's home, City of Plattsburgh Planning Board has received an application from them, and they determined it's a type 1 action, coordinated review, and they want to do the secret, which now, if he tells us if we don't have to redo it, then we were right the way we're doing it, I guess that's okay. And he's like a good zoning attorney, I guess.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. He's what he does, he taught, right? So that was fun.
He does
So
trainings.
anyway, the question is simply, can we have Lisa write a letter informing the planning board that we've agreed to let them be lead agency? I'm looking for a motion regarding.
I move that we agree to grant lead agency to the planning board for the Viola's home.
Okay, seconded by Kathleen, I'll let, I heard she's coming up. All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, 6, that was 6 yeses. Okay, we have minutes.
Yep, I've reviewed them.
You did?
I did.
Did
you
you find
review?
anything wrong?
Yes, I did.
You did? No.
I wanna know what mistake you guys found that we didn't find out.
What did we do? What did we do?
What's his name, that
What
guy?
did she do?
He's a health department guy or something.
He was
Huh?
a health, I think he's probably.
Dan
retired.
Ruger.
What's his name?
Dan Ruger.
Was he at the Department of
Oh,
Health?
Dan Ruger?
Department of Health?
Yep.
Yeah, thought I met him yesterday. Where's the
Okay,
minutes?
so what was the problem with the minutes?
I didn't have a problem with
Oh, I
it.
thought you said you had a problem.
No, you asked if I read them.
Oh, no.
Oh, no,
I
you
said
were
you
saying
did.
we have
I
a
said,
problem.
did we have a
Oh.
problem? You said
I'll
I
move to-
did.
No.
Move to approve the January minutes.
Okay, so I'm looking for a motion.
I just did, moved it.
Oh, I second it.
It's okay, all in favor? Aye, so the
Aye.
meeting minutes are good. Okay.
I thought you said
Does
did I read
anybody
them?
have any
I said, of
other
course I
business?
did.
I thought you had a problem.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
I
I second it.
Second, and that's Scott, second by Kathleen. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, that's off now?
Not yet. Not yet.